You know, my cats, now I have 4 cats. I think maybe last week I shared with you that Smudges passed away in September. So there was a wonderful, wonderful time where we had 5 cats, but we knew that Smudges' time was near. So now we have 4. And everything I read, they always say when you get a new cat in your home, you know, cats are food motivated. If you want the cat to climb on your lap or get closer to you, you know, offer them a treat. And then I began to realize that I'm food motivated. If you want my affection, angle a treat. This is what happens when we're really honest with ourselves. Very humbling as well. Oh. So just to orient us, I'll say, as always, we meet under the auspices of the Holy Spirit. We're here to recognize what we already are, as A Course in Miracles tells us in chapter 3 and throughout the course. But very specifically in chapter 3, Jesus says that the only meaningful prayer is a prayer for forgiveness, that we recognize what we already have. And then in chapter 4, he clarifies that having and being are the same. So we're asking to recognize what we already have and what we already are. And that is the love of God and the light of God. That is what we are. We all know that. There's a knowing within us, sometimes called our inner spark. There's the light of God, the memory of God within us that we can never be without. We can forget about it, we can bury it, but we cannot be without what we are. So in terms of recognizing, re-knowing what we already are, in this moment, if you'd like, you can close your eyes. That makes it easier. Just for now, have yourself a nice case of amnesia. Forget your name, forget your personal history, forget that you're even a body. With your eyes closed, just make contact with an inner sense of you and notice that you're here. Whatever that you is, you don't have to define it. There's just a sense of being here or a sense of being. You might say it's a sense of awareness or aliveness, just different ways of knowing what you know. And it's a knowing that we cannot be without. It's somehow there is being. And just notice. Really, most of a spiritual practice is starting to notice and refining the noticing. So in broad terms, often we begin with, if you open your eyes, coming into the present moment, which is part of time. So this is a very beginner, elementary way to come into the present moment. And in this moment, looking around you, just staying with what is. So I see my computer screen. I see a picture on my desk. You know, Eric may see a bowl of soup. I see a water bottle. And then connecting with the breath, it helps keep us right here, right now. And that's the beginning of observing or noticing. Then it can be noticed that there's this ability to observe and that we're doing it, and that there's no way that we can't do it. Even when we're unconscious, there's consciousness within the body being knocked out. And then there are automatic functions that take over that either wake us up or we check out completely. And then that knowing, actually, the I don't want to use the word thing, that which animates the body leaves the body upon death. And many of us have probably had the experience of being with a loved one after they died and seeing that they're not in the body anymore. So then there's this moment of they're not the body. Where are they? And that's what A Course in Miracles refers to as the mind. The mind is that which is the knowing within which we're dreaming that we're individuals. And the body seems to affirm that life takes place as a person in a body. That's actually just a story that is happening in the mind. And you can check that anytime you want simply by doing what we just did, which is closing your eyes and noticing, I'm here. If I didn't have a name, if I couldn't remember my personal history, there's still a sense of being here. We could imagine that infants, very, very young babies, they don't know where the body starts and where the mother begins. They don't know, where the mouth ends and the nipple for nursing begins. So there's just a sense, though, of aliveness. The baby does know something, and we can never be without that something. I've been noticing that the way that I read A Course in Miracles, and we've been reading the Course together, is called Lectio Divina. And I was introduced to Lectio Divina many years ago and forgot all about it, came across it recently, and was struck by the inner knowing. Lectio Divina is reading spiritual texts in a way that is absorbing them rather than analyzing them or intellectually focusing on only the words. It's a deeper, absorbing kind of reading, and that's what I've been led to do naturally, and we're doing it together. So it was fun to come across, oh, this is a thing, Lectio Divina. And there's actually some guidelines around it, 4 ways. There's, I don't know, you start with something and then do something, but I don't let myself be impeded by any of that. I would rather follow my own inner intuition and trust that guidance is doing its work through us, and that's all we need to do. So it was just delicious to learn that the sense I have that first we need to relax into the light language of A Course in Miracles, which imbues the Course with truth and wisdom and love, so that the reading of the words is secondary to simply absorbing the deeper message that came through this book. Yeah, and I'm thinking of lesson 189 now, where Jesus says something like, forget this world, forget this course, and come with holy empty hands unto your God. That's how we're reading A Course in Miracles. We can love the Course, but there's no need to be attached to A Course in Miracles. It's just a beautiful pointing to what we already know. So if there's that voice saying, no, I don't know, then that's easily recognizable as the ego. And then we can use that discernment and say, well, that can't be what I am, because it's a negative communication putting me into a tailspin of self-doubt. So that's not the voice that I want to follow. And that opens up a space for the still small voice within to blossom and become absolutely compelling, to the point that we wouldn't describe it as a small voice anymore. And for me, I find the same message coming from everywhere. Last time I introduced you to Hazrat Inayat Khan, my Sufi teacher. I met him through Puran and Susanna Bair, who are teachers here on planet Earth in their bodies currently. But their teacher in the Chishti order of Sufis is Hazrat Inayat Khan, and I felt more connected with him than Puran and Susanna, although I very much appreciated Puran and Susanna. So I get every day a message from Bowl of Saki, which is a section of the writings of Hazrat Inayat Khan, who has written loads and loads and loads of material, and it intersects beautifully with the Course in Miracles. It's not exactly the same, just a lot of overlap and a lot of reinforcement from different angles. So I'd like to read you this one. It says, the person filled with the knowledge of names and forms has no capacity for the knowledge of truth with a capital T. So this goes to Lectio Divina, that we're not just reading the words, we're going deeper into the truth. The person filled with knowledge of names and forms, so that's human knowledge. That's not the godly knowledge that the Course speaks of when it refers to God mind, has no capacity for the knowledge of truth. And then he says, a man filled with earthly knowledge, so let's say a human filled with earthly knowledge and what he calls learning is often only the knowledge of names and forms. And that person has no capacity for the knowledge of truth or God. Because this is a kind of knowledge that's based on information and control. It is the innocent and pure soul who has a capacity for learning. That's how we come to A Course in Miracles, as innocent and pure souls. And our capacity for learning is actually a capacity for unlearning everything that we taught ourselves when we're identified with ego. And Jesus tells us in the Course, we've been poorly taught by ourselves. We're the ones who came up with the whole idea of learning. There is no learning in God mind. There's nothing to learn. There's just pure knowing. When a person comes to take a lesson on any subject and he brings his own knowledge with him, the teacher has little to teach him, for the doors of his heart are not open. So we come to this gathering on Wednesdays to the best of our ability and our willingness with open hearts so that our teacher, Jesus, can actually imbue us with knowledge. And at the very least, we can notice my heart's not really open or it's just partially open. And Jesus, I would like you to open my heart more. And that can go on for many, many lifetimes. So I think I've mentioned to you that even though I've always known myself to be kind-hearted, and I've always valued kindness over smartness, I still feel that a softening is taking place in me right now, and it's a huge relief because there's so much unconscious tension, not just bodily tension. It's in the mind. It's unconscious ego mind tension, clutching and grasping, and it's all unnecessary. And it's so evasive that it's not like we can put our finger on it. So just using the body as a symbol of relaxing and using the breath to connect with the Holy Spirit starts to open us because there's a purifying aspect where we contact our innocence. And the Course says innocence and honesty mean wholeness. They all kind of mean the same thing. So we reconnect with our wholeness and our holiness when we get really honest with ourselves through our innocence, through lack of judgment, so that I can look at Amy and go, oh, she's food driven. I mean, that's the ego mind. That's the animal mind right there. Nothing wrong with it. It's just the way the ego operates. So let's take a look. And what happens is that you'll feel amusement. It'll be humorous. There may be initial shame, distress, denial, all sorts of things, and just let them come through. Let all of those beliefs and ideas and self-judgments and judgments of others, let them come through, because we're looking with Jesus at how the ego works. And we don't know, so we're not coming with a bunch of information. Intellect is the knowledge of names and forms, their character and nature, gathered from the external world. Intellect shows in an infant from birth, when he begins to be curious about all he sees. Then, by storing in his mind the various forms and figures he sees, he recognizes them as an addition to his knowledge of variety. This is all human learning. Man thus gathers the knowledge of numberless forms of the whole world in his mind and holds them and calls that, quote unquote, learning. This is Hazrat Inayat Khan, really saying the same thing that Jesus says in A Course in Miracles. He says, then this becomes his world, although it neither gives him a sense of unchanging comfort, nor does he thereby gain an everlasting peace. All this knowledge of names and forms does not bring us peace. And today we're going to read to have peace, teach peace, to learn it. And then Hazrat Murshid, that's the affectionate name for teacher, says, wisdom is contrary to the above named knowledge or information. Wisdom is the knowledge which is illumined by the light within. That's where we started. The inner spark, the memory of God within us, the light within, it's always here. It's a sense of aliveness. It's a knowing that we are here. And I don't mean here in the world. I just mean alive. This inner light. It comes with the maturity of the soul. So if the soul could be described as the immaterial individual, so it's still Amy, but it's Amy before Amy came into a body. And so soul is a fragment of spirit, we might say. There's many, many ways people talk about the soul, but just for now. So wisdom comes with the maturity of the soul and opens up the sight, that would be the vision that Jesus talks about with the Holy Spirit, to the similarity of all things and beings. And A Course in Miracles is all about the reflection of God's love and oneness here in the world boils down to sameness. We begin to realize we're all the same. We all share the inner light, no matter what the personality is doing, no matter how much somebody has covered the light with darkness. The essence of all of us is the same inner light. So self-interest starts to give way to this ongoing sense of sameness, selflessness. We can't help it, because as we gain understanding about what we already are, we know ourselves to be everyone. You can feel it just in your heart. It doesn't mean you don't object to events or personalities that are going on in the story. Of course, we can object to that. But the way that we're evolving is that we understand now that everything is either love or a call for love. And so arguing, fighting, it doesn't accomplish joining, which is ultimately what we want to do, because we're rejoining. We're just re-knowing what we already know. And nothing else satisfies anymore. It just doesn't. The wise man, the wise human, penetrates the spirit of all things. He sees the human in the male and female, and we could add in the trans and intersex, because right now in the 21st century, gender fluidity is really an interesting spiritual phenomena. And the racial origin, which unites nations. So there's only one race, the human race. He sees the human in all people and the divine immanence in all things in the universe, until the vision of the whole being becomes to him the vision of the one alone, the most beautiful and beloved God, which we are. The essence of all the mystical traditions points to the same truth. So that's Hazrat Inayat Khan and Lectio Divina. And Jnana Yoga. There are 8 limbs of yoga, not just the physical asana practice. And this is another way that I've come to know that spirit is the truth. And Jnana Yoga, Jnana, Sanskrit word, just Googling it. Jnana is knowledge of and about the self with a capital S. It's not the pursuit of any kind of information. It relates only to gaining knowledge and awareness about the self with a capital S. Self-knowledge with a lowercase s is the awareness that the individual self is inseparable from the higher self or the greater whole. So that's so interesting because I always related to being a jnana yogini, and I was given this message: self-awareness leads to self-awareness. And that's self-awareness with a lowercase s. So learning about ourselves as the person, as the body, becoming intimate with ourselves, noticing how we've avoided knowing ourselves, noticing how we have not had intimacy with the character, with the person and the body that we're expressing as in this lifetime. All of that noticing our psychological defenses, noticing our emotional wounds, all of that starts to lead to self-awareness with a capital S. Because little by little, as we get to know ourselves intimately, paradoxically, we start taking ourselves less personally, and we start taking everybody else less personally, because we begin to see that we all feel the same way in different amounts. Everybody has their own unique recipe, but we're all using the same ingredients. The ego ingredients: sin, guilt, fear, a sense of separation, a sense of anxiety, depression, jealousy, competitiveness, all the fear-based emotions. We start to realize these are the mechanics of the ego. I came in as an ego, and so of course I'm suffering as an ego. And noticing how that works is the very job of A Course in Miracles and A Course in Miracles student, is to look at the ego with Jesus and see it differently, see it above the battleground rather than just on the battleground, being human with no perspective. So I wanted to share this article that I wrote. I spoke with you a couple of weeks ago about why, how I found that the question why is an ego question. It usually leads to a wild goose chase. And, it was spelled in my mind either WHYLD or sometimes WYLD. Why is a wild goose chase was the message that I was given. Because it just keeps us going down the rabbit hole of ego questions, but it doesn't really lead anywhere. We don't really need to know why. It's more helpful to know, where in my body am I feeling something? How can I use this to connect with the Holy Spirit? What am I really? I tend to leave out who, because that just references the person, and I find that I get stuck in personhood. And why? Why is just sinking deeper into stories and human explanations. So I don't know how I came across it, but I did find this article I wrote, and I noticed that it had the "Why is a wild goose chase" in it. I think it's called "Is an Obsession with God Healthy?" Is an obsession with God healthy? So if Jesus uses everything the ego made, the Holy Spirit undoes, the Holy Spirit's task, I think this is a quote, is to undo everything the ego has made. Then if we give our imaginations, our beliefs, and our obsessions to the Holy Spirit, then they're used in very different ways. And this angel work that I've been interested in lately, angel work has to do with, I feel, just imagining from a higher perspective. It's just more light infused. There's something about angel work that just confirms with signs and synchronicities that yes, you're on track. You're on a spiritual path. You're understanding what's going on in a fuller way. And just for the fun of it, I ordered an oracle deck. So I like the pictures. So I got this oracle deck of angel cards, and just for the fun of it, I've been pulling cards. It's just for fun, you guys. And right before class, I pulled the card, and this is what I got. Can you see? It says expect miracles. It's just like, huh. To me, angelic energy is sort of like Holy Spirit energy, a little closer to earth, a little more, it feels a little more interventionist or something. Whereas the Holy Spirit, from my understanding, never intervenes in the story. The story isn't real. It's not really happening. The Holy Spirit is just always emanating love. And so love is greeting love and meeting love, and love is healing wounds. And the Holy Spirit is constant. So I pulled this quote from To Have Peace, Teach Peace to Learn It. An insane learner learns strange lessons. Well, that's what we all are. An insane learner learns strange lessons. An insane learner is the collective Son of God mind that follows the tiny mad idea and takes it seriously, and then just cascades down, 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 down into a series of insane lessons, all of them proving in one way or another that we've separated from God. And then scaring us with the supposed consequences, like God is going to seek vengeance on us and we can't trust anything spiritual. We can't trust God anymore because God will never forgive us. All of that. Those are the insane and strange lessons. Strange because we can't really separate from God. So the wholeness that we are remains whole. And it's very strange that we would want to continue scaring ourselves. And yet we do. However, there is what Jesus calls the compromise approach, that once we awaken, we realize time was never real. But while we're still dreaming, Jesus meets us here in the dream and uses linear time to help us escape from time. And in that, there do seem to be a series of lessons where we're understanding more and more that what we're believing in is strange and insane. And in that sense, we're less insane and we're less strange than we were when we started the course, you might say. For some of us, we do the course for 30 years and it seems like nothing changes. But that's okay. You have to realize that we're really the sphere of time is humongous. And, how many lives did it take us just to reach this point where we'd even pick up this book? So time is on a very different scale than we as people expect time to be. And you don't really need patience. Really, it's the development of trust that calms us down and makes everything okay, no matter where you're at. That gives us true self-acceptance and allowing that all we need to do is invite the Holy Spirit to guide us and accept the Holy Spirit's invitation to follow. That's really what we need to do, and not worry so much about how fast anything is taking or how far we've come or how somebody else seems to be awakening and not me, All of that is very seductive, but it doesn't really serve any kind of real higher purpose. Chapter 6 is called The Lessons of Love. I love that title, The Lessons of Love. Section 5 is the Lessons of the Holy Spirit. Now remember, in the introduction to the text, Jesus tells us, I'm not here to teach you love. That doesn't have to be taught or learned. You are love. But what the course is for is to help remove the obstacles to the awareness of love's presence. And that's why I really wanted to focus on love. So we're in section 5, the lessons of the Holy Spirit. And we read section A, to have, give all to all. And that's about unconditional giving and how the ego would say, if you do that, you'll be left with nothing. The ego operates on trades, bargaining. I'll give you this and I'll get that, and you won't have this anymore, and you'll take a loss, but I'll gain. And the the Holy Spirit's lesson is to have give all to all. Once in a while, people do that literally, but it's really coming from your heart. It's cultivating generosity, and it's also cultivating a sense of security that we're always provided for, whatever that means for each of us individually. We're always provided for. So, section B, to have peace, teach peace to learn it. So, readers, read slowly. And if you stumble over a word, don't worry about that. And if you need to read something over, just go right ahead and read it. And know that your reading is like a child whispering into a parent's ear, that God just loves the feeling that we want to show up. That's all. This is a metaphor. God doesn't literally know we're here technically, but in our hearts, we are loved and we are appreciated. And listeners, lean back, close your eyes. Don't try to understand the words. Just be porous. Be an absorbent sponge connecting with the wisdom and the light beneath the words of A Course in Miracles. And then we will come back and we will read through again. And that's Lectio Divina.
To have peace, teach peace to learn it. All who believe in separation have a basic fear of retaliation and abandonment. They believe in attack and rejection, so that is what they perceive and teach and learn. These insane ideas are clearly the result of disassociation and projection. What you teach you are, but it is quite apparent that you can teach wrongly and can therefore teach yourself wrong. Many thought I was attacking them, even though it was apparent I was not. An insane learner learns strange lessons. What you must recognize is that when you do not share a thought system, you are weakening it. Those who believe in it therefore perceive this as an attack on them. This is because everyone identifies himself with his thought system, and every thought system centers on what you believe you are. If the center of the thought system is truth, only truth extends from it. But if a lie is at its center, only deception proceeds from it.
All good teachers realize that only fundamental change will last, but they do not begin at that level. Strengthening motivation for change is their first and foremost goal. It is also their last and final one. Increasing motivation for change in the learner is all that a teacher need do to guarantee change. Change in motivation is a change of mind, and this will inevitably produce fundamental change because the mind is fundamental.
First step in the reversal or undoing process is the undoing of the getting concept. Accordingly, the Holy Spirit's first lesson was to have, give all to all. I said that this is apt to increase conflict temporarily, and we can clarify this still further now. At this point, the equality of having and being is not yet perceived. Until it is, having appears to be the opposite of giving. Therefore, the first lesson seems to contain a contradiction, since it is being learned by a conflicted mind. This means conflicting motivation, and so the lesson cannot be learned consistently as yet. Further, the mind of the learner projects its own conflict and thus does not perceive consistency in the mind of others, making him suspicious of their motivation. This is the real lesson, why, in many respects, the first lesson is the hardest to learn. Still, strongly aware of the ego in yourself and responding primarily to the ego and others, you are being taught to react to both as if what you do believe is not true.
Upside down as always, the ego perceives the first lesson as insane. In fact, this is the only alternative, since the other possibility, which would be much less acceptable to it, would obviously be that it is insane. The ego's judgment, here as always, is predetermined by what it is. The fundamental change will still occur with the change of mind in the thinker. Meanwhile, the increasing clarity of the Holy Spirit's voice makes it impossible for the learner not to listen. For a time, then, he is receiving conflicting messages and accepting both.
The way out of conflict between two opposing thought systems is clearly to choose one and relinquish the other. If you identify with your thought system and you cannot escape this, and if you accept two thought systems which are in complete disagreement, peace of mind is impossible. If you teach both, which you will surely do as long as you accept both, you are teaching conflict in learning it. Yet you do want peace, or you would have called upon the voice for peace to help you. Its lesson is not insane, the conflict is.
There can be no conflict between sanity and insanity. Only one is true, and therefore only one is real. The ego tries to persuade you that it is up to you to decide which voice is true. But the Holy Spirit teaches you that truth was created by God, and your decision cannot change it. As you begin to realize the quiet power of the Holy Spirit's voice and its perfect consistency, it must dawn on your mind that you are trying to undo a decision that was irrevocably made for you. That is why I suggested before that you remind yourself to follow the Holy Spirit to decide for God for you.
You are not asked to make insane decisions, although you can think you are. It must, however, be insane to believe that it is up to you to decide what God's creations are. The Holy Spirit perceives the conflict exactly as it is. Therefore, his second lesson is to have peace, teach peace to learn it.
This is still a preliminary step, since having and being are still not equated. It is, however, more advanced than the first step, which is really only the beginning of the thought reversal. The second step is a positive affirmation of what you want. This then is a step in the direction out of conflict, since it means that alternatives have been considered and one has been chosen as more desirable. Nevertheless, the term more desirable still implies that the desirable has degrees. Therefore, although this step is essential for the ultimate decision, it is clearly not the final one. Lack of order of difficulty in miracles has not yet been accepted, because nothing is difficult that is wholly desired. To desire wholly is to create, and creating cannot be difficult if God himself created you as a creator. The second step, then, is still perceptual, although it is a giant step toward the unified perception that reflects God's knowing. As you take this step and hold this direction, you will be pushing toward the center of your thought system, where the fundamental change will occur. At the second step, progress is intermittent, but the second step is easier than the first because it follows. Realizing that it must follow is a demonstration of a growing awareness that the Holy Spirit will lead you on.
Thank you. Thank you, darlings. Weaving the fabric of love. You might notice that the paragraph that you read had special significance for you. Often, we're taken by surprise, like, wow, that was just what I needed to hear, or that answers a question that's been lurking. But more than anything, I just feel that when we read it, it knits us together in a beautiful way. Okay, so let's go through. A was to have, give all to all, and B is to have peace, teach peace to learn it. And these are the lessons of the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is Jesus's teacher, and Jesus is a follower of the Holy Spirit. We are the same as Jesus, but we're younger. So we do well to follow his guidance, and he refers to his teacher, the Holy Spirit. So to have peace, teach peace to learn it. All who believe in separation have a basic fear of retaliation and abandonment. So when we, as the Son of God, as a collective, chose to follow a tiny mad idea that we could separate from God, and when we took that seriously, what happened was that the ego then kept making stories up to keep us involved and engaged in this thought system of separation. And it's a thought system of sin, which means the same thing as separation. Guilt. Guilt is the thing that says, yes, you're guilty of having accomplished the separation. So guilt is the glue that holds the whole idea of separation together. It's what convinces us that it happened because we feel so awful, even though there's no need for that feeling whatsoever. And then fear. So we have a basic fear that God is going to retaliate and God has abandoned us, when that's just a projection of we blamed God for our separation, like, oh, you couldn't give me everything I wanted, so I had to leave you. And I've abandoned you, God, so I don't want to take responsibility for that. So I'll just say that you abandoned me. And that's the insanity of the ego, and that's how projection works. And we all know that feeling of projection. You know, there's just the old story. If you've ever cheated on a boyfriend or girlfriend, you know that you might start getting paranoid and feeling like they're cheating on you. But it's actually, no, you're cheating on them. And now you know what's possible because you never thought you could do that. You know, or vice versa. You might have a jealous boyfriend or girlfriend who accuses you of cheating, and you know you're not cheating, and it turns out they're cheating. So that's just a very classic example of projection, and it works in every way you can think of. And all who believe in separation believe in attack and rejection. So that attack and rejection is what we perceive and teach and learn because we believe in it. So we believe that we've attacked God. We had to steal God's life from God in order to have life ourselves. And we rejected God in order to get to play it being God ourselves. And then we reverse it. And we think everybody's doing that to us. And we're the innocent victim, which is not real innocence. These insane ideas, the ideas of retaliation, abandonment, attack, rejection, are clearly the result of dissociation and projection. Dissociation is splitting off from a part of ourselves that we don't want to know about. For whatever reason, we can't handle it. And projection is what I was just describing about projecting onto somebody else what it is that we've done. When we project, we dissociate from what came before. We forget why we're projecting. And that becomes a case of amnesia. So we don't remember that we were a mind who had an idea to separate from God. We don't remember any of that. We're just holding on to a feeling that we're vulnerable and in danger, and God and the Holy Spirit are a threat. They cannot be trusted. What you teach, you are, but it is quite apparent that you can teach wrongly and can therefore teach yourself wrong. So I would be careful with this language and just say what you teach, you are while you're teaching it. You believe that you're that. You seem to be that because that's what you're believing in. So if I'm walking around believing that I'm separate from God, then I'm teaching that I'm separate from God by seeing everybody else as separate. It's deeply unconscious. It's not on the surface where I know I'm going to treat you as separate because I feel that I'm separate. It's what the entire ego dream is supporting and mirroring back to us. Everything looks separate. Nature is separate, animals are separate, bodies are separate. Everything is a symbol of separation. And we experience dissociation in human terms as well. And very often, the victim of any kind of violent crime or rape dissociates. So during the act, a person may sort of feel that they're on the ceiling, that they're not in their body while something violent is happening to them. And that's a description of dissociation also. So that's how the ego experiences it. We as spirit experience dissociation by forgetting that we're a mind, which is what we are. That's what we fundamentally are, a mind, a collective mind. Many thought I was attacking them, even though it was apparent I was not. I always find that sentence very touching. This is Jesus sitting with us, saying to us right now, many thought I was attacking them, even though it was apparent, it was obvious that I was not. And when we start to align with love, you may very well find that being loving is triggering to the people around you. People can get very irritated when you're loving towards them. So you're in good company because Jesus knows how that feels. And he's supporting us. And this is part of the way he motivates us to bring us back to sanity and say, yeah, loving people is not strange. Them being triggered by love is strange, but you have to not tell them they're wrong. You have to hold on now to this teaching I'm giving you, which is unlearning what you've taught yourself, which is that everything is a potential threat. An insane learner learns strange lessons. What you must recognize is that when you do not share a thought system, you are weakening it. So this is so powerful. As we withdraw our belief in the ego thought system, we are weakening the ego thought system. We're not getting with its program anymore. And that's why it starts to kick back, whether you feel it inside yourself as self-doubt, or a sense of this is irresponsible or this is woo-woo what you're studying or any of those kind of things. Or if you feel it with the people around you that you really want to help, but you're unable to help in a straightforward way. It's going to have to be some indirect way, just like the Course is actually helping us indirectly. It's not just pushing God in our face and saying, this is what you are, because we couldn't take it. It's like staring straight into the sun. It's giving us the forgiveness practice so that we can systematically desensitize ourselves to the ego thought system, to fear, to a sense of threat, little by little. Well, we're going to learn through guidance how to show up for those around us in a way that we can sustain and continue to weaken the ego thought system by not joining with it. We can agree to disagree. We can kill them with kindness, but we're not going to fight. We're not going to fight. That's just going to keep us opposed. What you resist persists. Those who believe in the ego thought system, therefore perceive this, I'm going to say love, because Jesus is saying many thought I was attacking them, though it was apparent I was not. And Jesus was a symbol of love. So what you must recognize is that when you do not share a thought system, when you do not share it, but you also do not attack it, that you are weakening it. And those who believe in the thought system perceive your weakening of their thought system, because we're not believing in it anymore, as an attack on them. This is because everyone identifies him or herself with his thought system. That's what identity is all about. And every thought system centers on what you believe you are. That's why identity is so important in the human world and why people get so passionate about love of country or love of their ethnicity or their culture. Identity is this huge thing with humanity. And with the Course in Miracles, we don't care. Blood is not thicker than water. Skin colors don't matter. Cultures don't matter. Nothing matters. We're all the same, essentially. And what we are is love. And what we are is joined. We really are. Whatever you resonate with, you could say what we are is light. What we are is beauty. What we are is a natural, ongoing sense of well-being. There are many different ways of describing what is beyond description and beyond human comprehension. If the center of the thought system is true, only truth extends from it. And Jesus is telling us that the center of the thought system that he's giving us in A Course in Miracles, love, is true and only truth will extend from it. But if a lie is at its center, only deception proceeds from it. And a lie is at the center of the ego thought system because it's telling us that we've separated from wholeness. And it's telling us that life includes death. And it's telling us that light includes darkness. And none of this is true. But Jesus' thought system of love and light and life is true. John.
Hi. I was thinking about no differences and family of origin issues being half Greek and half Austrian. The Greek side identified with being Greek all the time. And my dad and his brothers were defensive. But us younger kids didn't believe in it. But we didn't have the greater joining because we were just kids. But when you were speaking, I thought, well, then came the Beatles and Woodstock, and it blew my conservative family's mind that the collective would say, oh my God, the world is going to pot. Well, literally on some level. Long hair, there goes the Donna Reed show and everything that was on TV at the time. And everybody was angry. And I and some of my younger cousins were going, oh man, this is great. It's a complete change and everything. So I just wanted to share that because, there was a belief system in the family of origin. Then there was the collective of here comes Woodstock. It's going to blow your mind, right? So thank you, because that hit me when you were speaking and it freed me up yet again about what the world, the human world wants. Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you, John. Your little young heart just was not picking up on the whole strong Greek identity thing and the defensiveness around that. You just weren't with the program.
No. So
Yeah,
I
we
ended up
often,
being a black sheep. I was a problem kid.
that's right. I mean, that's often true for those of us who find ourselves on a spiritual path. I always appreciate when any of you bring up a human example of how this works. And then it starts to reinforce like, right. And then when the 60s came, that felt right. And then, of course, the 60s couldn't sustain itself. And I couldn't believe it. I was about 14 in 1968 or 9. And by the 70s, I think they started inventing SUVs. And I was so idealistic. And I just thought we're going to love each other and we're going to save the environment and we're going to help the planet and the ecology. And then all the opposite things started happening. And in politics, to be young and know something, to be loving, it takes everything we have to hold on to that. Something deep inside knows, but it's very hard to stand up to authority. And parents are God figures when we're kids. But it's helpful to look back and go, wait a minute, I've known this since I was little. Yeah. Paragraph 2. All good teachers realize that only fundamental change will last, but they do not begin at that level. That's interesting. So only the fundamental foundational change will last, will sustain itself, but good teachers don't start there at the fundamental level. Strengthening motivation for change is their first and foremost goal. Isn't that interesting? To be a good teacher, what we must do is strengthen motivation. And so a good course student, the development of trust is the strengthening, is us permitting, allowing, and inviting Jesus to strengthen our motivation to stand firm in the face of all the kickback that we're going to get from the world when we really start to know that our spiritual self is the real self. So strengthening motivation for change is a good teacher's first and foremost goal. It is also their last and final goal. Increasing motivation for change in the learner is all that a teacher need do to guarantee change. So if we're motivated to change teachers, to change from the ego as our default teacher over to the Holy Spirit as our teacher, that's really all we need to do, because that will increase our motivation and that will confirm that our choice is the only true choice. Change in motivation is a change of mind. And this will inevitably produce fundamental change because the mind is fundamental. So the miracle is always taking us back from the mindlessness of the ego thought system, which is based on keeping us in the physical world and preventing us from remembering that we are a mind, back to the mindfulness, you could say, of recognizing that what we are is immaterial and is a collective. Paragraph 3. The first step in the reversal or undoing process is the undoing of the getting concept. Accordingly, the Holy Spirit's first lesson was to give all to all. Then Jesus says, I said that this is apt to increase conflict temporarily, and we can clarify this still further now. At this point, the equality of having and being is not yet perceived. I mentioned that at the beginning of class today, having and being. Until the equality of having and being is perceived, having will appear to be the opposite of giving. So we think that having is the opposite of giving. Having is getting, but it's not. Having is this overflowing generosity of wanting to give because that increases our having. That's the spiritual law. That's a law of love. And you can recognize it when it comes to sharing a song, and then we all enjoy the song, and that feels even better than just listening to the song alone. And there are many examples that you could give. Therefore, the first lesson, to give all to all, seems to contain a contradiction that having is getting, not getting more and more and more, since it is being learned by a conflicted mind. And so we have to become more aware that our mind is conflicted, our mind is split. And the healing of the mind is healing that sense of that fissure, where it seems like we separated from God mind. That's the healing. And then we realize there's never been any separation. But for now, it's important for us to notice splitting, and splitting is taking place all over the place. Splitting of communities, splitting of families, but also internally, splitting things that we feel we're not allowed to show, our emotions, splitting off anger from how we're communicating with somebody. And this is why psychology on the human level is so important, because when we do not actually gain self-acceptance and learn to integrate our feelings and how to communicate in a kind way, those old problems will keep us absorbed and consumed. And even if we have spiritual experiences where we experience being the light and knowing that all is one, it's unsustainable because we keep being pulled back by ego gravity into unfinished business. You don't have to perfect the personality, but you do have to be on to your own issues that keep you addicted or absorbed so that you can loosen them up and then not be distracted by them. They can play out the rest of your life. There are spiritual teachers who have chain smoked the rest of their lives, but they're not distracted by that. And so they sustain their connection with what they truly are. As long as we're consumed or distracted by our emotional problems, our family problems, our physical illnesses, our fears about survival, poverty, all of these things, that keeps us busy. It keeps the mind busy and unable to sustain connection. Or it can sustain connection, but it will act out in human ways that lack integrity, that are not honorable, such as spiritual teachers who have been sexual predators in their own communities. That's an explanation for that kind of behavior. Splitting, very important to pay attention. The healing of the mind is regaining wholeness. Conflicting motivation means that a lesson cannot be learned consistently as yet. Further, the mind of the learner projects its own conflict and thus does not perceive consistency in the minds of others, making the learner, the Course in Miracles learner, suspicious of others' motivation. So even while we're trying to learn this course, we're still projecting out all of our upset feelings. We haven't caught on yet to how we project. And we need to know that so that we can have the responsibility of sight, which is spoken about in chapter 21. This is the real reason why, in many respects, the first lesson is the hardest to learn, to have, give all to all. Still strongly aware of the ego in ourselves and responding primarily to the ego in others, we are being taught to react to both as if what you do believe is not true. Let's break that down. The reason that the first lesson, to have, give all to all, is the hardest to learn is because we're still strongly aware of the ego in ourselves, and we're still automatically defaulting to the ego a lot, even though we're willing not to anymore. And so we're still in a process of catching that in ourselves. And while we're responding to the ego in ourselves, then we must respond to what we see as the ego in others. And so we're projecting just automatically, we're on automatic. And so we need to catch that too and kind of reel everything back in and say, wow, if I was just seeing that person as angry, maybe it means I'm angry, or maybe it means that I'm hurt because I felt that they should behave differently towards me. But whatever I believe, it means that I think we're separate. That's what it really boils down to. You're you and I'm me. And if I reel that back in and say, okay, Jesus, I'm willing to forgive. I'm willing to undo my belief in separation. That's what forgiveness is. Now, how do I do this in this situation where it's obvious to me that that person is an a-hole and I'm right? What do I do right now? And just that willingness to join with Jesus, a healing takes place, whether we're aware of it or not. Often we will feel something subtle, which we need to reinforce and strengthen our motivation by paying attention to. And that might be a feeling of relief, a feeling of de-escalation, a feeling of not wanting to fight or argue. It might be a feeling that the breath comes easier. It might be a feeling of, I'm going to take a time out. There's many, I'll take a walk. I'm going to go do something else now. In many, 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 many ways that a healing can come through. And also just trusting, if nothing seemed to happen, that, yeah, I'm a devoted student of this course. Jesus promised me a healing. I have received a healing. I have received a healing, just to reassure ourselves of that, whether I'm aware of it or not. And it's building up to a treasure chest of healings that at some point will become clearer and clearer to me. Upside down, as always, the ego perceives the first lesson as insane. The ego thinks to have, give all to all is crazy. And the ego is upside down and reversed from what we truly are. In fact, this is its only alternative, since the other possibility, which would be much less acceptable to the ego, would obviously be that the ego is insane, and the ego's not going to consider that. The ego's judgment here, as always, is predetermined by what it is. The ego is not open-minded and is not fairly weighing the wisdom that is coming through Jesus. It's predetermined. It's already made up its mind. We're separate from God because I want to exist as an idea. And in order to maintain myself as an idea, I just need you to engage with me. I don't care how you engage with me. I just need you to engage with the tiny mad idea of being separate from God. That's it. So whenever we withdraw that attention and say, but I'm not interested in maintaining that idea anymore, then we weaken that thought system. And then that thought system can kick up a fuss in the form of others or in the form of internal turmoil. And again, we can just say, I'm getting hip to this now. And I recognize this flather, and I'm not going to take it seriously. I'm realigning with the Holy Spirit. And it becomes a good, healthy habit. I'm just realigning with the Holy Spirit. I'm just asking for help. I'm turning to Jesus. I'm going to take an angel course and play with the angels. I'm going to do anything that starts to lift me up out of this story. And I'm going to be aware that I'm using a story to undo a story until we don't do that anymore. I'm going to use magic to undo magic until I don't do that anymore. I'm going to use a belief system to choose a different belief system. I'm going to use my imagination to imagine something other than where am I going to be in 5 years? What is my human passion and how can I fulfill it? How can I have a healthy human relationship? There's nothing wrong with any of that, but you can also use your imagination to say, how do I recognize myself as light, as the light that predates sunlight? How do I know myself as a star seed? How do I recognize what I already am without knowing anything? I don't know anything. I'm willing to not know anything and simply hold Jesus's hand. Jesus used my imagination for that. Our thoughts are images that we have made. So we're undoing everything through the processes that the ego invented. That's how we're outmaneuvering the ego. We're just saying yes to everything. We'll use the imagination, we'll use belief, but ultimately we don't need any of that. And we discover ourselves to not be any of that. And that discovery is so beyond our personalities that our part is just allowing and inviting spirit. That's all we need to do. And play and be lighthearted and enjoy. And be kind. You know, if we're in very difficult circumstances or if we're with others who are in difficult circumstances, kindness will flow through us in healing ways. That, you know, that's addressing whatever situation we're in, wherever we happen to be in the world, in our lives, in our karma, in our soul development, whatever you want to call it. You know, some people are having much, much, much more painful, difficult karma than others. And we're not supposed to be laughing lightheartedly in their faces. You know, common spiritual sense will prevail and we will meet people with heart in whatever way heart is called for. The fundamental change will still occur with the change of mind in the thinker. Meanwhile, the increasing clarity of the Holy Spirit's voice makes it impossible for the learner not to listen. This is because our motivation is getting stronger and stronger. And the thinker is the decision maker, what Ken Wapnick calls the decision maker. That's the thinker. It's the part of the mind that can choose again. It's the dreamer of the dream, recognizing, oh, the dream is stemming from right here, but not in the head. It's the mind. For a time, then, he is receiving conflicting messages and accepting both. So for a while, because we're so defaulted to the ego, we're now much more willing and have much higher motivation to tune into the Holy Spirit. And then we notice that unconsciously, somehow we clicked back, maybe like a circuit breaker, you know, breaking. And then we have to go back into the garage, into the room with the circuit breaker and go, you know, and push that switch over and realign with the Holy Spirit. So we start to get better and better at catching, like, oh, wow, I popped back to the ego as a default. And then we crank over and then, I'm flowing again. It seemed very difficult, but once clicked into spirit, yeah, this is empowering. This is what feels right. So for a while, we're going back and forth, and it's conflictual because we're still trying to get out of a conflicted thought system. The way out of conflict between two opposing thought systems is clearly to choose one and relinquish the other. So we're choosing the Holy Spirit's thought system and we're relinquishing the ego's thought system. And even though it says that they're opposing thought systems, only the ego opposes. The Holy Spirit isn't opposing anything. But from the side of the ego, it seems like opposition. If you identify with your thought system, and you cannot escape this, and if you accept two thought systems which are in complete disagreement, peace of mind is impossible. For a while, we try to negotiate with the Holy Spirit and say, I want to keep a few things from my life, my human life. And other than that, I'm willing to be spiritual with you. And the Holy Spirit is saying, it doesn't work that way, baby. It's all or nothing. You have to give me your life. You have to come on in here. Otherwise, you're clinging to a dream, which is really a nightmare. So that's what's going on. Yet you do want peace, or you would not have called upon the voice for peace to help you. And its lesson, the Holy Spirit's lesson, the voice for peace, Jesus, the Prince of Peace, is not insane. The conflict is insane, but the voice for peace is not insane. There can be no conflict between sanity and insanity, right? There's no reasonable argument there if you're insane. Like, yeah, we should really be insane. It's really better. No, it's not. Sanity is better. Only one is true, and therefore only one is real. So now we get into the uncompromising nature of the course, that truth is true and reality is God mind, and peace comes with God mind, and that's that. The ego tries to persuade you that it is up to you to decide which voice is true. But the Holy Spirit teaches you that truth was created by God, and your decision cannot change it. We don't decide which voice is true. We just decide which voice we want to listen to. Only the voice for God is true. As you begin to realize the quiet power of the Holy Spirit's voice and its perfect consistency, it must dawn on your mind that you are trying to undo a decision that was irrevocably made for you. We're trying to undo God's decision that we are love and we are light and we are whole and we are one. It's irrevocable. It cannot be revoked, and we cannot change God's decision. We are at one with God, even though we're dreaming that we're not. That is why Jesus says, I suggested before that you remind yourself to allow the Holy Spirit to decide for God for you. So we don't want to decide for God as a human, because then we're getting into religions and intermediaries and popes and priests and, all of the man-made stuff that is not a direct connection to the truth. Some people can use the essence of religion to get to the truth. However, when you're a course student, you're on a mystical path, so you don't need a religion as an intermediary. You are not asked to make insane decisions, although you can think you are. The ego will tell us that we're making insane decisions. It must, however, be insane to believe that it is up to you to decide what God's creations are. So here's the impeccable logic of Jesus. You read a sentence like this: it must be insane to believe that it's up to me to decide what God's creations are. Is it me who knows, or is it God who knows? And I know we're personifying God right now, but we just roll with it, because if there's something in us that resonates with this teaching, then we realize that, yeah, God must know what I don't know. The Holy Spirit perceives the conflict exactly as it is, and therefore his second lesson is to have peace, teach peace to learn it. We've been so conflicted over to give all to all, and the ego telling us, but then you won't get anything, and then you won't have anything, and then you'll be left with nothing, that he has to factor in this next lesson, which is, okay, we have to remove the conflict. We need to help you get peaceful now. To have peace, teach peace to learn it. When you're not feeling peaceful, it's a big challenge to be asked to teach peace. It's like when you feel like you don't have any food on the table, it's a big demand to feel like, a stray dog is starving and comes to your door, and I want to take a crumb of what I have and give it to this creature, because my heart goes out. This is still a preliminary step to have peace, teach peace to learn it, since having and being are still not equated, but we're getting there. It is, however, more advanced than the first step, which is really only the beginning of the thought reversal. To have means to give all to all, and to give all to all means to have even more than when you started. That's the thought reversal. The second step is a positive affirmation of what you want: to have peace, teach peace to learn it. This then is a step in the direction out of conflict, since it means that alternatives have been considered and one has been chosen as more desirable. Making that choice is a big deal. Nevertheless, the term more desirable still implies that the desirable has degrees. So when we make the choice initially, we're not all in. We're in, but we're not all in, not yet. Therefore, although this step is essential for the ultimate decision, it is clearly not the final step. You know, it's kind of like getting engaged to be married and then feeling all of your ambivalence about, I don't know, but you're still engaged, you're not married yet. So step two, we're engaged, but we're not totally committed. Lack of order of difficulty in miracles has not yet been accepted because nothing is difficult that is wholly desired. So if we still feel pulled in different directions, if we still forget and we default to the ego, we know that we haven't completely desired to have peace. And that's all we really need to know as course students. We just want to be honest with ourselves and Jesus and just say, yeah, in this particular situation, I'm not totally willing to have peace, because that means um, making somebody right who I don't feel ready to allow that privilege yet. And that's a big mistake, because we're not making anybody else right. We're just seeing the light in everybody. So we're still learning how not to be in conflict and to move out of dualistic ways of evaluating situations completely. We're rising above. We're not taking sides. To desire wholly is to create, and creating cannot be difficult if God Himself created you, us, as creator. God creates, and His creations create, and that's what we are. And that's what we're returning to. And you'll often find as a human that you become more creative as you're more immersed in a spiritual path. The opposite can happen too. Ways in which you've always been creative might drop away and not hold an interest for you anymore as other things come to take over. The second step, then, to have peace, teach peace to learn it, is still perceptual. We're working within the ego thought system, which uses perception, but the Holy Spirit takes perception and turns it into truth perception. So instead of the ego mirroring all of its insane ideas back to us, the Holy Spirit now reflects God's love and God's clarity and God's peace back to us. The Holy Spirit takes over perception and turns it into true perception, which is not absolute vision. We're not there yet. And the Course never takes us there. It takes us to the top of the ladder, and then God picks us up from there, so to speak. It's all a metaphor. The second step, then, is still perceptual, although it is a giant step toward the unified perception that reflects God's knowing. As you take this step to have peace, teach peace to learn it, and hold this direction, you will be pushing toward the center of your thought system where the fundamental change will occur. At the second step, progress is intermittent, goes back and forth, but the second step is easier than the first because it follows. So it's like a flock of birds. You know, the bird in front is moving through the wind, and then every bird behind, it's a little easier to flow through. Realizing that it must follow, that the second step must follow the first, is a demonstration of a growing awareness that the Holy Spirit will lead you on. We're following the Holy Spirit, and we're trusting that we've chosen a better direction now. And lots of things come to reinforce that to us, especially if we pay attention. I have a song for us today. And I don't know why, but it's been pushing at me all week, so I'm going to play it. And I'm just going to say that although it's a pop song and it's about girls and boys and love, that as I'm singing it, I feel like I'm singing to the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit is always involved in the musical choices for this class. And by the way, I told you that I adopted a 17-year-old cat, Prego, a few months ago. And I can't even begin to tell you how much we love this Prego. She's a gray cat, but she has some white patches down the front of her that they look like diamonds. They look like white diamonds. And so I've taken to calling her Diamond Girl. And then I wanted to play you the song Diamond Girl.
Precious stone, part of earth, where heaven is rained on. Makes no difference where you are, day or night time. You're like a shining star. How could I shine without you? It's about you that I am. Whoa, 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 whoa. Diamond girl, roaming wild, such a rare thing. Radiant child, I can never find another one like you. Part of me is deep down inside you. Can't you feel the whole world is turning? We are real and we are burning. Hey, diamond girl, now that I found you, well, it's around you that I am. Whoa, 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 whoa.
I'm such a child of, what was that, the 60s, the 70s? Do you guys remember that song? I never listened to the words before. This is the first time I ever read them, and I was like, yeah, they're pretty high.
Also makes you feel like dancing, and dancing
It does.
is such a joy.
I would love to get up and dance with you all. You have no idea.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, guys, I'll see you next time. If you have any questions and you didn't get to it in class, you can always email me, amymiracles@gmail. And thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Mwah.